particular mood of the boardroom, we had 103 business leaders, predominantly CEOs, but also some directors. A little secret story, no longer secret, but we actually introduced some directors and chairs a few years ago, mainly to capture some women, because someone said it was wall-to-wall men, and that was the truth, because as we know, back in the day, that is exactly what the story is with CEOs. But the game is changing now, but however, we have kept to it. So anyway, the theme of this year is time to pivot. And there's a message here for the government that really, the great unwind, you've had a year of putting in policies, unwinding those of your predecessors, a big sense that that is pretty much over now and time to move forward. And clearly, Minister, you have been doing a lot of work on the fiscal side to create that platform for growth, and we're looking forward to hearing more of that as you move forward. So no more brainstorming. That's really one of the messages from the mood of the boardroom this year. A bit of a comment here from one of the industry association chiefs. Fiscal restraint is right for the times, but when good investment stacks up, we should just get on with it, irrespective of where it comes from. And we do want productivity and growth to actually go ahead. A comment here, which I really like, for one of the protagonists in this year's mood. You've mastered the science of politics. That's getting the agendas out there, getting everything done. You now need to move to the other side of the coin, the art of politics, having that horizon, painting a future, taking the public with you, and moving forward so New Zealand can realise its full potential. And I just put that out there. It's a message really for both politicians. So there is a good story to tell. Confidence is up across the board, and I think what it does is it shows how resilient New Zealand business is. It's been a tough few years, but if you go back in time and you look at the GFC, again, it was pretty difficult for a while, but people got on top of things and moved forward. Respondents this time, when we look at the New Zealand economy, that rating of 3.23 out of 5, that's a big improvement from last year, but more particularly, we haven't seen that height of confidence in the New Zealand economy in this survey, going back really to when Bill English was Prime Minister. So that just gives you an idea of the cycle. There are specific concerns, and that's no surprise at the moment. Energy right up there, again, security of energy supply, something that we looked at in more depth in the report in quite a big splash, and talked to a lot of you about that. It's a big issue, and it's something that really is on the mind of business, particularly when it comes to moving on for the future. Interest rates, inflation, cost of living pressures, they're there also in rates, they're there in insurance, so it's still sitting there. Looking out internationally, geopolitical volatility, that's a big one. And a warning here from Dame Therese Walsh, those geopolitical and economic uncertainties do mean that we're not immune from further headwinds. What's keeping you up at night, thinking at night? Sometimes managing profit expectations, and if you look at the results this year, you can understand why. Also achieving top-line revenue growth and regulatory issues. This is sort of a big shift from where it used to be about thinking about things like skills and labour shortages, that type of thing. This is more immediate. So what does this refer to? This refers to, we put a question in the mood of the boardroom this year because we were quite struck by comments by the departing Treasury Secretary, Carolee McLeish. And basically, she warned that structural changes are necessary to address the Crown's structural deficit. And she talked about a capital gains tax and a more efficient superannuation scheme. And we asked people, what do you think about this? And 77% of you agreed. And more particularly, when we drilled down and asked people if they agreed with it, what do they think should happen? A large proportion, more than half of those who put forward suggestions, said a CGT, a capital gains tax. And you'll recall just a week or two ago when a prominent CEO made a comment on this score, it did get a fairly aggressive response, shall we say, from the beehive. I think that ground is shifting, and it comes through in a number of places in the report. It's not definite, but there's absolutely an appetite to have more discussion on this. And Mainfreight, Don Braid said on this very question, you know, capital gains taxes, PPPs, lessons from Australian super and its success, these wouldn't go amiss. So there's an appetite there to be open to it. Whether or not anyone can ever get a capital gains tax up is another matter, and there is some scepticism from Thomas Pippos from Deloitte on that score, which you can also read about in the report. Here's, right throughout the report, you'll see peppered through some top concerns from leading business people. And here are some here, and you can just read that and digest that for yourselves. You know, there are things that concern people, particularly around social unease. And one of the questions we asked in the report was, what did people think about the issues raised by Sir John Key recently when he talked about, you know, in terms of race relations, maybe we'd gone too far, maybe the temperature should be dialed back a bit. And 77% of you agreed with that it has gone too far and it is creating concerns out there. But also it's those issues around productivity and so forth. But I think one of the interesting things there which came through, and we didn't drill into it this year and probably will next year, is the impact of AI. And AI is something that is on the mind of a lot of you. How do we leverage AI? What are the impacts? Does it do what we think it would? And so forth. But right through, there are concerns there. And again, Minister and Barbara as well. I mean, it's well worthwhile having a look at those because people have been quite frank. The Prime Minister. I mean, for ministers in this room, this is probably a source of mild delight for you that someone looks at the PM's KPIs. I know it comes the other way around, and you are actually monitored on your KPIs on a pretty regular basis. But anyway, we did ask, you know, what did people think about the Prime Minister? And in actual fact, on his own performance, ensuring cabinet ministers have focused on delivery. That's how you rated him. That was his highest rating. And tellingly, 43% of respondents gave him 5 out of 5 for this. So that thing about being focused on delivery is pretty important. And if you recall back to the prior government, the policy bonfire, DPMC having to put in place a delivery unit, that type of thing, I mean, obviously, Christopher Luxon doesn't want to fall into that trap and has been very determined to actually get some runs on the board. Here we go, some of those other ones, leveraging his brand for New Zealand. Those of you who have travelled with him offshore this year do actually rate his performance on those trips very highly. He does bring high energy. He actually is quite charming on those trips in between, you know, doing 27 meetings a day, that type of thing, which doesn't leave much room. But he actually is doing the work for New Zealand offshore. As Neil Pavia-Smith said, Christopher Luxon's outperformed in terms of what's been delivered so far. And also from Craig Stobo, he's managed the coalition well, and as you can see there, focusing on solutions to the cost of living and economic growth are priorities. And from Savannah, from Shione, it feels like there's good rapport, but not so sure about winning hearts and minds. And this is actually probably the weakness there. On this, going back, you will see right down the bottom, political performance as Prime Minister. I talked to Christopher Luxon about this a couple of weeks ago, and it will be no surprise to him if he's watching today, that he didn't rate so high on this. I mean, his contention is he's only been a politician for a short period of time. He came and melded the caucus together in 3 years, a victory in there as PM, which is actually quite astounding when you think about it. It took Sir John Key 6 years to get to that point. But his contention also is that he's growing into this role and he will modify his tone, which a lot of you would like to see happen a bit. Okay, so rating the policies, the maintenance of tight fiscal settings, right up there. something which is, you know, absolutely the top performance from the Cabinet as a whole. And congratulations to you, Nicola, on that score. There was a lot of disbelief at the beginning of the year that on the path you were taking, but you held to your nerve, and people applaud that. So 78% of people believe you're, you know, doing a credible job and that you are proving a very good economic manager. So that's pretty good, and it lines up really well when you go back to, you know, first year up for previous finance ministers. From Roger Partridge, you inherited a hospital pass, but now people want to see the meat on the bone. And I think that again comes through repetitively in this survey. Go back a bit. Giving the game away there. Again, you're seen as competent and confident, and some major challenges lie ahead. Mike Horn from Deloitte again, you face the fiscal issues that you've inherited, but now we want to see a clear direction on how to move forward to a more sustainable, longer-term solution. One of the areas that you are being novel on with the Social Investment Agency, obviously it's early days, but within the mood of the boardroom, there is an absolute appetite for that revolution to take place. So it is something when you get it up and running and you've appointed your CEO, or, you know, we'll see how that comes out next year. So looking to the Cabinet, again in the room, Erica Stanford, congratulations, Minister. Everyone rates you at the top. And I think it's really interesting when you talk to people about Erica Stanford, who has education and also immigration portfolios. Erica is clear, she's a great communicator, she's very focused on delivery, and particularly with young people, making sure that we have people come out of the system who are not only ready for the workforce, but actually ready for their future lives. And there's actually, you know, huge admiration, Minister, for what you've done so far, and it is actually seen in this survey. So there we go. For the Cabinet Ministers in the room, you'll all be pleased to know you're on that graph there, that graphic. You're all in the top 10. Someone changed out at the last moment, and I suspect they might have had a sneaky view, no, that they mightn't have been in the top 10. Anyway, it was just a it's just a cheeky aside by me. But anyway, here we go. Rating down, you know, you can see them all there. Everyone in this Cabinet, in this top tier, has major portfolios and a huge workload. And you can see there people working offshore, they're working here, they're facing big challenges, and, you know, it's not easy in this environment. But I like this from Neil Pavia-Smith. It's an impressive Cabinet. Performance in some key portfolios has been outstanding. Again, Nicola, you have the toughest job. You've got to drive those fiscal and public sector reforms, which are so vital to our future. But again, this counter view, a bit of a worry that not focusing on the biggest issues for New Zealand's prosperity, getting distracted by stuff and disenfranchising talented, experienced directors from taking up positions. And this is a fairly blancmange view of an undercurrent, which is really in the boardroom about not personally denigrating directors like, for instance, Kiwi Rail and also Health New Zealand. There was some quite pungent commentary about that, but I haven't used it in the report, but the message is there that really that tonal thing needs to be addressed, particularly if we're going to have the confidence to move forward. So we looked at David Seymour. He's highly rated for leading his own party and also what he brings to the role. He is setting up this Ministry of Regulation, which, as you can see, a potential driver of future growth in New Zealand and urgently needed. But then not everybody is a supporter of David at this moment, and I think it is, you know, that he is sometimes seen as a bit extreme in his views and is losing support, including from some who might have voted for him. And a message there that the divisiveness needs to stop. And again, it's not the Kiwi way. And again, that message from Sir John Key a few weeks ago, which resonated with people in this room, that winding back the temperature on race relations is going to be pretty important. Obviously, the die is set for the next 6 months or so while the legislation works its way through Parliament, but there really does need to be a healing process. It can't continue, and this does come through. Looking to Winston Peters, a number of you see him as very impressive. In the sweet spot, smart, strategic, and vital to our interests. And again, this comment comes through repeatedly in this survey. I think from Craig Stobo again, the saddlebag to National's bike. And I quite like that, it's a good way of putting it. But a saddlebag that is not actually slowing the bike down. Some would suggest it's great having them offshore, and some of you did say that, particularly media-related CEOs, I might add. But anyway, he has done a punishing schedule. He's visited 31 countries, and some of them twice, since he became Foreign Minister for the third time. And that is a huge workload, I have to say. More importantly, he's also worked very hard to stitch New Zealand back into the Western Alliance, if you like, of security partners, and he's rebalanced New Zealand, and obviously the Prime Minister also on top of that. But, and more particularly in the Pacific, and the visiting Deputy Secretary of State out of the United States recently, I was talking to him at a media roundtable in Auckland, and he basically said, huge role played by New Zealand, absolutely essential as ears and eyes in the Pacific, but more than that, actually the way we as in the United States, approach the Pacific. So New Zealand is getting recognition for its external policies, and a lot of kudos to him. So we did ask Barbara, a bit unfair because you've only been in the role about 7 months or so, are you shaping up as a credible future Minister of Finance? And a third of the people say you are, and a third are uncertain, and a third want to know a bit more about you. So, it's actually quite positive. At this stage of a finance spokesperson's journey, it's a hard act, particularly when you're against somebody in their prime who's also in the first flush of taking on a portfolio. So I have to say it's a very positive reading. But I'm probably going to embarrass you now. But anyway, an absolute class act, equal balance of smarts and empathy, and quite the unicorn. There you go. But there was a counter bit to that didn't fit on the slide, and from this banking sector CEO who said, you'll be forced to sell the tax reform inside out, and you should use your skills to bring business pragmatism to the discussion rather than be forced to sell an ideological fantasy. So there you go, that's the kind of dichotomy that you have to deal with. But I think what's come through is you are actually spending the time, you're getting out among business, you're not shy to ask those kind of questions like, what is the worst we can do to you? Which I hear is something you've asked more than one CEO to give that feedback. And it's interesting because this is a very fast move for you also, just in your second term, to take on this major portfolio. So a bit like Nicola, a very quick rise. So, it's one to watch. We looked at Chris Hipkins, he's rating at that. We won't spend too much time on the opposition today. He's keeping a low profile, but again, this comment from an industry association chief, being leader of the Oppo isn't easier, and the media chipping machine has already started, and that's the one that says, is it time to replace you, when you've only been out of office for a few months. This comment here, laying relatively low, isn't silly because criticism too early on can look like sour grapes and gets a valid response, well, why didn't you do it then? So again, it's a very interesting situation. We looked at the US election, and I hope you're right for your own sake, but 82% of you favour Kamala Harris, only 4% support Trump. 2 of you are in this room. Don't hold that against you. And some of you would like someone else altogether and came up with a few names, but you know, you're pretty much out of luck. But it's interesting for New Zealand because the point about it is if Donald Trump gets in, the United States is our second largest trading partner now, and there is that potential for 10% tariff impost on our exports. So that is something that all of you in business who have got your red and blue playbooks underway, you need to know about how that might impact on you. In terms of international conflict, again, concerns about China and Taiwan potentially erupting in a way which would impact on our interests, and potentially really because China's significance to our economy. I mean, if things blow up there, that is actually going to impact here because of the disruption to global trade. And this is the kind of discussions that take place more often now at board table, and they never used to, but in the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen a steady shift in the kind of conversations that major companies are having. The energy situation. This is a major issue for New Zealand at the moment, and there's 3 pages devoted to this in the report, and we went into it because it rated so highly on the survey when it came to thinking about domestic confidence. But you know, we do need the investment in the right places, and there are big impulses coming down the line, EVs, AI, data centres. All of this is going to require a lot more capacity. And the perception there is not only do we have sufficient investment in the right place, but there's not a great deal of confidence in how this is being addressed. And it's one that the message is that people would really like to get around the table more with government on this, because there are not only commercial interests at play directly with gentailers, but it also affects industry, and we've already seen the Windstone closures, and arguably there'll be more. So, and that is quite disruptive and impacts on confidence as well. So this is something which really we're looking to the government to address. There is a sense now that the Tiwai Point smelter deal, a 20-year deal, is being put in place. That takes away one potential overhang, and also, of course, not doing Onslow. So that does create more of an environment to move. And also the acknowledgement, Minister, that fast track is also being put in place. But it is a sense this is something that needs to be addressed with a fair degree of urgency. We looked at infrastructure, and you kind of beat us this week by getting out your very positive announcements that infrastructure is going to move now. You will get on with the agency and so forth. I have to say that on that score, there was, you know, there is the sense that 95% of you do believe a transparent and consistent pipeline will provide industry with the confidence to invest here. But again, a point raised by Don Braid, rethinking these political cycles, because what tends to happen in New Zealand, as we all know, things start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. And this is very disruptive for planning. I mean, Don has basically said this 3-year cycle, political cycle, has a major influence on infrastructure planning and delivery. And he suggested a longer cycle of 4 or even better 5 years to enable a government to plan and deliver, rather than worrying about political consensus. I have to say, despite all the talk about bipartisanship, there's still not a great deal of confidence that this will be achieved. And you know, maybe Kieran McAnulty and Shannon Halbert and Chris Bishop and you, Nicola, can actually forge something there, but it's a big ask, and meantime, not too much is happening. Just a closing issue, talking about Kiwi Rail. I haven't gone into it in the particular survey in depth, but it is an issue that this boardroom has actually got very mixed views. Only about a third or so think that the government took the right steps there. Others are not sure or remain to be convinced. We're getting into the back end of the year, last quarter, still no resolution. And this is a concern for people who have investments, need to use the Cook Strait ferry or in the transport and logistics businesses, and that comes through. So get that resolved, but more particularly the message is talk to people about it. They're not just interested parties, but they're integral to our country's future. So we're looking forward to your addresses. So just a closing message, one for you, Barbara. Labor should aim to create a business environment that stimulates growth, showing Labor's not at war with business, but rather working alongside it to foster a competitive economic environment. And that's a bit of a challenge for you over the next 2 to 5 years, or however long it takes, maybe more, to become Finance Minister. Some of your predecessors did spend some time on here, I have to say, in your role. And also to Nicola, the Boardroom's calling out for more than just fiscal prudence. Business leaders want a more ambitious, clearly articulated plan and a more engaged approach with the business community. Over to you both. Oh, no.
Thank you very much, Fran. Some important messages there for our 2 keynote speakers to take on board, and also a presentation that I think will put a bit of a spring in Erica Stanford's step on her way out today. We are going to move now into the keynote addresses and then the finance debate, but just ahead of that, I thought I'd ask for a raise of hands for anyone that watched the vice presidential debate yesterday. Not many, which I think means it's safe to say that today's debate is the most hotly anticipated debate of the week, right? So here we go. And unlike in the US, we do encourage audience participation and questions. So if there is anything you'd like to put to our speakers, head to slido.com, and the event code is mood24. So that's slido.com, mood24. Put your questions in sooner rather than later if you'd like to put anything to our speakers. And it's now my pleasure to invite Murray Kirkness back onto the stage. Thank you very much, Murray.
Kia ora again. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Fran. That was a fantastic presentation, and I do encourage everyone to take the time to work your way through Mood of the Boardroom. There's an awful lot of reading, but it's very worthwhile. It's my pleasure now to introduce to the stage Nicola Willis, Minister of Finance and National Deputy Leader, who was first elected to Parliament in 2018. Prior to becoming an MP, Nicola held a number of senior management roles at New Zealand dairy cooperative Fonterra, has served on the boards of Export New Zealand and policy think tank the New Zealand Initiative. Her political experience began in advisory roles to John Key, both in opposition and as PM during his first term in government. I've mentioned it here last year, but I'm quite chuffed that she has a postgraduate diploma in journalism. I think that stands you in good stead. As well as holding the finance portfolio, Nicola is the Minister for Public Service, the Minister for Social Investment and the Associate Minister of Climate Change. Nicola, welcome to the stage. Nicola's got 7 minutes. Don't overstep. Okay, thanks.
Murray, I've made a career of overstepping. I'm not going to stop now. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Can I acknowledge all of you, business leaders who have come through a tough time for the New Zealand economy and increasingly appear to share my optimism about the future we have ahead of us. I'm confident that if we channel that optimism into investment and innovation, good times lie ahead. Can I acknowledge NZME and the New Zealand Herald for hosting this event? Fran, 22 years, extraordinary. What an event. And I would like to acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues, Erica Stanford, Mark Mitchell, Todd McClay, and from the other side of Parliament, Barbara Edmonds, Carmel Sepuloni, and Shannon Halbert. In a room traditionally dominated by men, it is great to have 2 women leading this debate, and I acknowledge you, Barbara, And I would say that not only that is it good to have 2 women, but with 12 children between us, it's pretty clear that you and I share a vested interest in the future of this great country. And look, the government, business, we hear you. After a tough few years, it is time to pivot. It is time to go for growth. 10 months ago, when we came to office, we faced quite a different landscape from that which we are seeing today. And we have had to lean in to solving those big foundational issues, getting inflation down, ensuring that there was downward pressure on interest rates to give the Reserve Bank the confidence it needed to reduce those rates, charting a path back to balanced government finances. And so today we do stand proudly on a foundation in which inflation is well down, forecast to be back in target this year. We've had the first reduction in the official cash rate a year ahead of where the Reserve Bank forecasters thought it would happen. There is a downward trajectory ahead of us, and the green shoots of business confidence are re-emerging. So with that strong foundation, we are going to have to maintain discipline and focus, because fiscal discipline is not a one-off, one-budget affair. It's an ongoing state of mind. And ours is not just about reduction. It's about driving more value from the significant investment the government has in the economy, in services, and its ability to derive much better results in the services we deliver New Zealanders. But we're raising our sights. As I say, we are optimistic about the prospects for New Zealand. In a world that is increasingly unstable and faces many challenges, this is a country with peace, stability, security, an outward orientation, a map of trade relationships, the ability to grow many more, strong institutions, abundant natural resources, smart people, and here's the thing I'm most excited about, immense, untapped potential. And so our government is driving to release that potential. We want to see more investment, more innovation, and we recognise our role in setting the framework in which that can occur. There are 5 key areas that our agenda focuses on, which are not just about the next few years, but about the next few decades. Number 1, we have to start with human capital. We have to think about education and skill development. And I'm delighted to see Erica at the top of this survey, because it tells me that you share our passion for ensuring our kids get a better deal out of their schools. Doing the basics brilliantly, not just an economic enabler, but actually the best thing we can do to deal with social inequality. And that focus on back to the basics and education, aligned with a social investment approach to release more value from the work that we do to intervene in the lives who are vulnerable, will make a difference. Second area, trade and investment. Well, congratulations, Todd McClay, the fastest ever free trade agreement agreed with the UAE, and there will be more ahead. There have been successful trade missions, and we are looking not just at how exports can flow, critically important, but also how investment can flow, releasing capital into our economy. We've made initial steps there, and you can expect to hear more from us on it. There is no doubt that the lack of capitalisation in our firms is one of the reasons for our low productivity, and allowing foreign capital to flow is critical. Third, science and innovation. We've already announced a gene regulator up and running. The Agri-Zero initiative we are building on, and I'd like to congratulate those in the room who are contributing to it, and we see huge upside from AI. Fourth, regulation and competition. It sounds dry, but I would put to you that one of the most significant things we can do for this economy is fix the great burden that has been the RMA, that has held back housing development, held back productivity and growth. And we are fixing it, and we are starting with a fast-track regime which we will make announcements about in the next few days, which I think will unleash a wave of development and investment, and it couldn't be soon enough. And we will continue our drive to remove red tape, whether it's the triple CFA, the building rules. We think a lot can be done there. And we accept the OECD challenge that in a small economy, making sure we have good competition in major sectors is very important. And so, yes, we will continue our work to take up the recommendations of the Commerce Commission into our banking sector, and we are alive to challenges in the grocery and electricity sectors as well. Finally, infrastructure. We hear you. You want an enduring framework and an enduring pipeline. So do we, and we are thinking very hard about how to achieve that. I want to acknowledge Barbara, who has been working with Chris Bishop on ensuring that we can have some bipartisanship here. Because we need private capital, we need private investment if we are to reach our infrastructure deficit, and we would love some bipartisanship on that too. So we're hungry, we're ambitious, we feel your urgency, we need you on board. These next few decades can be New Zealand's decades. If you want bold, I want it too. Bring your ideas. It's time to go for growth. Kia ora.
Well done. Thank you, Nicola. You barely overstepped. Well done. Yeah, thanks very much. And we'll call you back up very shortly, if that's okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Nicola Willis. Welcome now, very special welcome now to Barbara Edmonds, the MP for Mana, who entered Parliament in 2020 and rose quickly through the ranks, becoming a Cabinet Minister during her first term. With Grant Robertson's retirement in February of this year, she was appointed to a current role and is ranked 4th in the Labor caucus. She's the Labor spokesperson for finance, economic development and for infrastructure. Before entering Parliament, Barbara worked for an insurer before taking up a role in the policy unit of the Inland Revenue Department. She was appointed a departmental advisor to National Ministers Michael Woodhouse, who praised her as first class. There's lots of praise this morning, Barbara. And she also worked for and advised Judith Collins. Despite her impressive credentials and management skills, she has ruled out ever wanting to be the Prime Minister due to her family commitments. We'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Edmonds. Seven minutes. Good luck.
Thank you. Ina mana, ina reo, e rauranga tirama, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Au te whaata lofa atu ma le wha alo alo, ma lo le soifua maua ma le langi e mama. Good morning, everybody. A huge thank you to the New Zealand Herald, NZME and Fran. I do want to share those sentiments. 22 years, that's a long time, but I can totally see the work that you've put into this and to your team, so I acknowledge you for that. To Catherine Rich, it is a wonderful occasion to be able to share the stage with both you and the Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis. I think the fact that we've had 4 women leading today's event, I think, is an achievement which we should all share. I came here today thinking, I'm just going to embrace it, you know? I'm just going to have fun. I think it's an extreme privilege for me to be in a room with our business leaders of this country. I'm here to listen, I'm here to absorb. I'll also be responding, of course, but really the phone is open to you. The New Zealand business community is unique. It has always punched well above its weight on the world stage. For clarity, I mean all of you, from the A-list right through to the C-list. I am a firm believer, though, that government's role is to work closely with business, help small ones to innovate, and ensure the settings are right so the big ones can thrive. Governments should invest in research and development to improve access to technology, open up opportunities for business on the world stage through trade, and ensure that our investment grows an economy that supports everyone who lives in our great little country and to thrive. I've really enjoyed the past 7 months getting out, mostly here in Auckland, and sitting down with people across the business sector. Coming from quite a niche tax and insurance background, you've all been incredibly generous with your time. I'm looking forward to continuing to build our relationships over the next 2 years of opposition. Nicola Willis and her colleagues have spent a lot of time, and I acknowledge what you've said today, this morning, Minister. I actually believe that our team of 12 could possibly a Cox list 12 or a dozen in the rowing team, but I do want to acknowledge that it is tough being able to balance everything that we do, so I do want to acknowledge you today. But when businesses do well, New Zealand does well. Workers do well, New Zealand does well. You employ people and innovate and create to make people's lives better. Labour's underlying philosophy on work is making sure there are enough jobs for people. You can't do that without business. It's about ensuring people feel secure in their jobs, are able to contribute to their workplace and help build good and successful businesses. Workers are an asset to any business and shouldn't be seen as just a cost. I'm utterly committed to sitting down with you and talking through what works for you and what doesn't. Dispelling the myths, understanding what has gone well in the past and what hasn't. Something that does concern me, though, is the number of Kiwis who are choosing to leave New Zealand and the way some of the government's decisions are giving them that extra push. 6,000 jobs obviously gone in the public sector and counting. Manufacturing jobs are disappearing before our eyes. 8,000 fewer people in construction. Even through COVID-19, we didn't see unemployment like this, and the forecasts were awful, but keeping people in work and business afloat was a priority for Labour, and I am really proud of that. New Zealanders are finding it tough anyway, and you all know the statistics, but losing the household income along with a job can be quite terrifying, and it's no wonder that so many are looking to greener pastures. In July this year, a record was set for the number of net New Zealanders leaving. 55,800 Kiwis chose to move away. My concern isn't only the people who are choosing to leave for a better life, but it's the skills loss, which will have an effect on our ability to innovate, deliver, and grow as a country. It's no surprise to me that the mood of the boardroom is optimistic, even though the economy is doing it tough. You are leaders, you look forward, so you're looking for those green shoots. June 2024 does mark the 7th consecutive quarter of stagnant or declining per capita economic activity. We are now very much at the bottom, I think, of the economic cycle. Things will get better, but this is because of you. They will not get better overnight. We know unemployment has some way to go, but there are many steps until interest rates are back. Many steps until interest rates are back to a balanced level. We're hoping not too many. And our business community is resilient. Many of you have made it through the GFC, the Christchurch earthquakes, Cyclone Gabriel, the Auckland floods, and collectively we made it through the COVID-19 pandemic. I know you all just want to get on with it, but also want a vision for what we aspire to be and where we want to go. The Rebuilding the Economy pledge that was the line of choice for the election seems limited to the task of returning to surplus. It ignores the demographics and the fiscal time bombs on our horizon. New Zealand faces substantial fiscal challenges over the short and longer term. Addressing these challenges will require brave decisions that tackle the system we all work in. These are brave decisions that need to be enduring, and that is what Labour has done best. Whether it's ensuring Kiwis could retire with dignity by the introduction of KiwiSaver and the Super Fund, families could afford the basics and be incentivised to stay in work through Working for Families, or through the safety nets introduced by Sir Michael Joseph Savage of State Housing and Welfare. Then there's the list of trade deals, UK and the EU free trade agreements to name a couple. Labour is the party that has always looked ahead to progress our country. Planning for the future will mean conversations about the appropriate level of government spending and debt. By 2060, 10% of our GDP will be spent on healthcare and 7% on superannuation. Returning to surplus is a moot point if you're also not providing Kiwis with the healthcare that they want and need. We as a country need a government with a positive vision and informed solutions. Every political party likes to talk about growth and productivity, but we need to back it up. Often when thinking about productivity, we focus on cutting-edge tech, and we should. We're seeing this with R&D tax credit making a meaningful contribution to research and development. But we also need to back smaller Kiwi businesses if we're serious about tackling productivity. Many of our SMEs are not technology enabled. They struggle to have time and the capital to make the changes they need. The government, along with the sector, should be doing more to help. The Treasury's chief economist came out last week saying productivity growth alone is not enough to alleviate fiscal pressures. We must also realistically assess our economic situation. We are capital poor. We need more sustainable solutions than tinkering around the edges with new levies and revenue gathering measures. It's a conversation our party is having and one I hope many of you can feed into as part of our meeting going forward. Unlike the 3-year parliamentary cycle, I know that you have to plan for the future in a much more long-term way. Governments should do better. Climate change is one that we cannot ignore. We know what our international markets will be expecting of us. As an exporting nation, we need to make sure we pay attention to that. Really, I started the speech talking about values and talking about the ability to embrace this challenge, but I'll continue with that pledge. I won't just stand here and make political promises I don't intend to work my ass off to keep, and we may not always agree, but I will always take a meeting or a call, and I will always listen. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Let me say here.
Thank you, Barbara. Nicola, could I please ask you to come back to the stage? Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to have a Q&A session. As Tim said earlier, welcome any questions from the floor. Please do use Slido, and it will come up on the screen. I'll try to ask them. A series of questions. Some will be for both of you, some just for one of you, with a minute to answer each, if that's okay. Nicola, can I please start with you? What will success look like for you at the end of this term?
Growth back, fiscals sorted, social investment up and running, development progressing, housing market starting to show signs of responding to our supply side moves, education results improving, the Prime Minister able to point to each of his targets and track success, and a sense in New Zealand that when we tackle hard problems and we make tough choices, we can make progress. That when we make the right decisions, good things happen, so let's make more of them. An appetite from the country that says, well, you did bold things and we're doing better now, so keep going, go harder, go faster, let's go for more growth.
Thank you. Barbara, it's sometimes said that you're too nice for politics. Have you got the killer instinct required to make a good finance minister?
Absolutely. You don't have 8 children and you don't go through a tax degree, a law degree, going through that without, the struggles and the challenges. I've been through many things in my life. This is clearly not really a challenge for me, hence why I'm embracing it. But you can be nice, smart, intelligent, considered, and do the hard mahi.
I'm pleased you clarified at the end because I was starting to wonder if you thought you were nice.
We're both nice.
Nicola, Treasury's chief economist last week gave a sobering speech saying that the return to surplus from 2027-2028 will be driven by an unprecedented decline in per capita government consumption. Is he right? And are Kiwis ready for the tough years ahead?
Yeah, well, of course, the important piece of context, which you can see when you look at the graph in that report, is we had an unprecedented spike in government spending. From a historic average of under 30% of spending to a GDP ratio, we spiked up over 34%, and we're actually taking a pretty moderate position, which is let's get it back to 30, which is, by the way, higher than it's been for long periods of New Zealand's history. So it's really a story about COVID and the government's response to it. Of course it was appropriate that spending increased temporarily in response to COVID. The problem was too much of it got baked in. It's not sustainable, but this is also about basic economics, which is if you really believe that the government can spend every dollar better, then I'd like to introduce you to a number of businesses and New Zealand workers and New Zealand families who've got some pretty good ideas of what to do with extra dollars. And so we have to get that balance right. And it comes down to government being smarter about how we drive value from the investments that we do make and how we deliver services better and with more innovation.
So well, on that then, isn't your $2.4 billion a year allowance for new operating spending for each of the next 3 years, isn't that just completely unrealistic? Is that a recipe for austerity?
No, I absolutely reject austerity. What it will require from us is to find new areas where we choose to reprioritise. And we've got a good track record there. One of the unsung achievements, I think, of our first budget was that we found $23 billion worth of reprioritisation over 4 years. So that's $5.9 billion a year on average. And as we look to future budgets, that has to be the normal course, looking at where the investment and spending currently is and working out what we reprioritise so we can put it where it really matters, into health, into education, into the things that New Zealanders want to see us investing more in. Just like a household, just like a business, we shouldn't look at every dollar we're currently spending and say that's baked in forever. We should be prepared to say, where can we put the dollars to make the biggest impact?
Thank you, Barbara. Chris Hipkins has said that New Zealand could easily afford more debt to fund infrastructure. Do you think that just plays into the government's hands that your party's addicted to spending?
The context of that is he's talking about the fiscal challenges which are coming ahead, particularly in 2060. Those fiscal challenges and the way that the decisions are made today will impact on our children and the next generation and how they retire. So when he talks about debt, businesses in this room know you use debt for capital items. I've seen that in a number of conversations that I've had. So talking about debt for us is investment in infrastructure which supports productivity. So that conversation needs to be had. We haven't set our fiscal strategy. We will come back probably in the next mood of the boardroom or the one after that to have a greater discussion about that. But I'm wanting to hear from the room what you think that if we're going to borrow, what we should spend that on. And if we're not going to borrow, how do we afford those challenges which are coming ahead?
Question for both of you from the floor. And we'll start with you, Barbara. How would you stop the brain drain?
Comes down to ensuring that we can create productivity and growth here in New Zealand. What is productivity and growth? When I speak to businesses over the last 7 months, they say to me it's innovation, it's capital investment in machinery and tools, so therefore we're having people make things here, produce things here, sell things here to the rest of the world. They talk about education. And so I'm really, for me, having spent time on a number of school boards, I know the importance of education. It also comes down to the ability to make sure that we have a New Zealand where they want to live, where they have good schools to send their children, where they can go see their GP when they want to and can afford to see their GP. So there are a number of reasons, but the main thing is we need to ensure that we have productivity and growth here, so there are jobs here that they can actually work for.
Look, I stood in the Wellington Stadium with John Key many years ago while he filmed a video showing all of those empty seats in the stadium, saying that's how many people are leaving for Australia each year and we have to reverse it. And the thesis he had then is still correct, which is when we grow this economy faster, New Zealand looks like a much better place to live than Australia. And again, one of the achievements that wasn't heralded as much as I think it should have been of the last national government was it did reverse that trend. And so we can do that again. I think that New Zealand is fundamentally a much nicer country than Australia with much better people. But we do need to grow our economy faster, and that's where we come back to this prescription. And I know it sounds like a mantra, but it is about education, it is about infrastructure, it's about innovation, it is about regulation, it is about science. All of those things matter. But here's the difference between this administration and the last one. We recognise that you can't just posit a good intention, you have to deliver. Execution matters, and that's where Chris Luxon is the leader for our times.
Talking about execution, what are you going to do about our ferries?
We are going to make sure that we have a safe, reliable, Cook-Strait ferry service into the future. It's a very real answer, because making sure that we deliver that in a way that is sustainable and enduring and represents good value for the taxpayer does involve us doing the work. And I'd put to you that yes, it's true to say, because I can tell where you're going to go, that there are a range of views around the cabinet table about what that should look like. I actually think that has provided good testing of the assumptions that can be made as you put together a business case for what will be a very significant investment. And I'd also say this: if anyone thinks that the last project to deliver new ferries was a good one, go and read the OAAs, because it wasn't just me who walked into a dog's breakfast. The last finance minister was very concerned about it too, because what started as a $600 million contract to purchase ships turned into a more than $3 billion infrastructure build. That is not a well-conceived project, and it had diverged very much from its original intention. Cost blowouts were going to continue, and we had to take a very difficult choice. But will we deliver new ferries? Will we make sure we have safe, reliable crossings into the future? Absolutely, it's vital that we do.
I'd like to talk to you for far more than a minute about that, but that's okay. Barbara, the ferries, we've seen the Dunedin Hospital cost blowout to an estimated $3 billion. We saw the light rail fiasco here in Auckland. Why can't Labor deliver?
So the Rust Review, which did review the Dunedin Hospital bill, didn't actually say it was going to cost up to $3 billion. There were actually a couple of elements in that review, which is a 72-page, if you haven't had a chance, have a read, because it can clearly set out why that project and the particular parts which the government now have to deal with are of concern. One of the major things I've learnt coming into opposition, because I've always been in government, whether it's advising government ministers or being a minister myself, the decisions you make when you come in are really important as to the settings that you're going to set over the first year, because it does take a government about a year to sort of bed in. The flip-flopping of infrastructure sector decisions is not great for certainty. Being a tax lawyer, certainty is key when it comes for business decisions. And so when you come in, you have to take a pragmatic, measured look at what's on the table and make those reprioritisations as you have. But those decisions actually have real-world consequences. It means that skills go offshore. So when the government does decide to ramp up its infrastructure program, which I understand is possibly today, you're going to have to make sure you have that skill set in New Zealand. We had to build that skill set up over the last 6 years. So taking a really careful, pragmatic view at what's on the table, making sure that if you're going to make a decision, you also take into account any unintended consequences. So when it comes to the ferries, that's about growth. It's important for growth around the rail enablement for the South Island. Mainfreight has said, and also I've seen other measurements, around $150 to $200 extra per container. That's a business cost, and then that will filter through to consumers. So I don't think it was a prudent decision. I accept that there were infrastructure costs on the side, which were obviously of debate. I've read the OAAs, I've read the letter exchange, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Take a more measured and considered view to it.
We're rapidly running out of time. Barbara, OCR announcement next week. If you were responsible,
Yeah.
would you see or hope for or demand a reduction in interest rates, and if so, by how many basis points?
I am hopeful for a drop for our people's sake. It's tough times out there, and the ability for a number of our... By how much? That's a tough one, and so I've seen 3 banks come out with 0.5. I've seen some come out with 0.25. That really depends. I mean, when I look at the GDP figures and the unemployment figures, they're clashing against each other. So, right, GDP figures are not going up. So my concern, I probably would look at a 0.25, but if I was leading with my heart, I would go 0.5.
Nicola, anything in that answer that makes you raise your eyebrows?
Look, the people in this room understand that I have to stay in my lane. And at the point that I start,
come on.
Well, I would simply note, Murray, that around 60% of the market is now factoring in a 50 basis point drop. I notice ANZ joined the 50 basis point crowd yesterday. They're typically more hawkish in their assessments, so that's very interesting. But I would not seek to influence the governor in any way, shape or form.
And I respect you for
well
that,
done.
for that reason. Yeah.
Nicola, who's easier to work with, David Seymour or Winston Peters?
I love working with both. Both of them challenge me in new and peculiar ways.
Barbara, how would Labor have approached the energy pricing crisis that closed Winston Pulp International's 2 central North Island mills?
Yes, I've heard actually a lot of suggestions from people in this room as well. I've heard one is around you need to basically incentivise more generation. I've seen responses around splitting the gen tailors and the generators. I've also heard basically you need to leave it alone. Those businesses that have failed is because they failed to hedge. we are going through a policy process, but I think the number one, if you go back to it around supply and demand, the generation needs to, we do need to invest more in the generation side. I can't say what we're doing in relation to labour and where we will come through with our energy policy, but I think that is the problem that you need to solve is around the generation.
Do you genuinely have no ambition to be the Prime Minister?
Me? I've got 8 kids, man.
I'd argue that makes you more qualified.
I know, I've heard that lots, and to be fair, I just want to be a good MP for my area. That's why I came into politics. I came into politics because I saw there were kids in my community who didn't have the same things my kids had. I came into politics because the safety nets that were available to me as a child who grew up on a benefit and then became a tax lawyer, I want those available to other children. So for me, that is my purpose.
It was a simple question.
Yeah, no, so I said no. I've genuinely
She's
said
proving
no.
she has the dexterity for the role.
Yeah.
Nicola, would you like to be the Prime Minister?
You know, the thing that motivates me, that I want to deliver... No, seriously, this is quite a serious answer. This is quite a serious answer. Bear with me.
Serious question.
No, the thing that I'm most motivated by is social investment. And I have this gift right now, which is I am the Minister of Finance and the Minister for Social Investment, which allows me to bring those two things together. I genuinely believe that gives me more power over the thing I care most about than being Prime Minister would. And so for so long as I have the impetus, platform and ability to drive social investment forward, I'm living the dream.
Couple of questions to go, Barbara. We heard earlier from Fran that there is a changing of the mood within this room and amongst the respondents to the survey around a capital gains tax. We recently heard Chris Hipkins say the Labor Party is looking at a capital gains tax. National has absolutely bollocked you about that election after election. Have you learnt your lesson? Do you think you'll try and get a capital gains tax on the table?
Our team is still going through that process as a party.
That was an easy question.
I know it was.
It
It was kind of easy. But the thing is that we shouldn't dampen down that discussion. We have huge fiscal challenges coming ahead, so don't dampen it down. I mean, I've heard privately from a number of CEs and boardroom people that we should have a CGT, just get in there and do it. But actually, again, this is politics. It's going to be a difficult tax to sell, whatever it is. But actually, in the period between now and the next election, I welcome those discussions. I welcome them publicly, and if you want to talk more about it, and for me, whatever we bring in has to be workable. And I think that's where my skill set, coming from a tax background, will help, whether it's tax, climate change, manufacturing, whatever it is.
Nicola, any thoughts?
Oh, look, a CGT is one of those things that, in theory, lots of people support, but as soon as you get down to the detail of, are you doing this in a revenue neutral way, or are you doing this as an additive tax, therefore making us a more highly taxed nation? Are you including the family home, because therefore are you incentivising more capital to go into property because it's the only tax-free way? Are you going to hit everyone's KiwiSaver account? Are you sending a message that at a time when we really need more capital intensity in our firms and higher levels of productivity and capital growth, that we're going to tax it? Once you have to deal with all of those questions, it isn't as easy an answer as some people think it is at the first blush. And what I'd put to you is, Barbara, if you're up for tough conversations, at the last election, my party started a tough conversation about New Zealand superannuation. I invite you to join me in continuing that conversation.
Happy to. And I think the Minister of Finance hasn't seen the Income Tax Act, because a lot of what she's talking about is already in the Income Tax Act, just in various different rules. So I mean, there is an opportunity that if you do go with a capital gains tax, some of those rules don't appear in the Income Tax Act. For example, foreign investment funds. Is there a potential that rather than foreign investment funds, which I know are an issue for a number of startups, and also the spillover benefits that you get from these highly skilled workers coming to live in New Zealand, and you know they obviously have they have a threshold of a few years. There is an ability to simplify the tax system, but I am more than happy to have that discussion and have it together on superannuation. It is a big challenge that we're going to face, and it is one that I know the society I want my children to live in. I know the society I want the next generation to live in, so let's have that conversation.
Well, that's an achievement.
Oh, I said to start a fight. This is good. Sadly, we've run out of time, but one last question, Nicola. You spent almost a term as opposition finance spokesperson. What's the best non-partisan advice you could give to Barbara?
Earn the respect of your colleagues, because ultimately delivery in this role is about their ability to execute in their portfolios. There is no finance without transport, without education, without social development. There is no finance without each of your colleagues rowing in the waka in the same direction. And I do want to say, as cheesy as it is, that that is something I feel incredibly supported in our cabinet and in my team, that I have a team of people around me who are paddling in the same direction and who support me to do this role, and recognise that I don't love being Dr. No. It doesn't actually come that naturally, but they've asked me to do that and to take that for the team, and so I do so willingly.
Thank you.
Barbara, 1 minute. The floor is yours. A closing summary.
Labor is here to listen. I'm here to listen. Please reach out to me. You've been incredibly grateful for those that I have met with. You have been gracious in your time and your free and frankness. We may not agree on everything, but I'm going to tell you why we don't agree. And I think that's how we can make New Zealand a better place, is when business, government and opposition do work better together.
Nicola?
We've come through a tough few years as a country, and you as business leaders have been at the forefront of it. It's still tough for many, but we have ahead of us enormous opportunity. You have a government who's on your side. We are resolutely pro-growth, pro-development, anti-red tape, and we are up for the big, bold moves that are going to be needed to shift the dial for New Zealand, not just now, but in the decades ahead. We want to lay the foundations that will mean not only that your business does well next quarter and next year, but that means Barbara and I's kids can look forward to being part of a more prosperous country with greater choices and opportunities. It won't always be easy. We will keep making tough calls, but we want to do that with you right beside us. We back you, so keep talking to us. We're up for the challenge. Let's go grow this economy.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please ask you to thank the Honourable Nicola Willis and the Honourable Barbara Edmonds.
Well, thank you very much, Nicola and Barbara, for those of us that have been watching the US debates. I've got to say that was refreshingly civil. It was great. And thank you also, Murray, for expertly moderating and keeping the debaters in line. Never easy when it comes to discussing finance. Could you all now join me in welcoming to the stage Simon Power, Chief Executive of Fisher Funds, for the vote of thanks.
Honourable Nicola Willis and the Honourable Barbara Edmonds, Ministers and Members of Parliament, Catherine Rich, Fran O'Sullivan and guests. Thank you to the Minister and Barbara for your time this morning. Thank you for sharing your views and your thoughts with us. It is a fact that when in politics, everyone outside the arena has an obvious and simple answer to complex problems and wants to have a say. And in a democracy, everyone has an opinion and does get a say, and long may that continue. A couple of reflections, if I may. The New Zealand public are exceptionally astute and will digest and evaluate complex ideas. They possess the subtlety required to interpret various positions and statements on matters of public policy. They can work their way through in a myriad of ways intricacies of messaging. They don't require sound bites and they don't require simplification. Thank you both for reflecting that today. A final observation. Everyone in this room wants New Zealand to do well. We too strive to live and work in a strong economy. We want an education system that provides opportunity and innovation, and we want to hear language that is hopeful and conveys the potential that sits in the economic engine room of our country. Came across a short quote the other day. Don't look back. You're not going that way. I think we would all agree that looking ahead surfaces potential, and thank you again for reflecting that today. We all look forward to working with policymakers and leaders in the period ahead, and we thank you again for your engagement this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking both the Honourable Nicola Willis and the Honourable Barbara Edmonds for their time today.
Thank you, Simon. And that brings this year's Mood of the Boardroom to a close. Massive thanks to everyone involved in putting the report and today's event together, especially Katie Riddell, who directed the event today, and of course, Fran O'Sullivan. On your way out, please do grab a copy of today's Mood of the Boardroom report, 36 pages of insights, analysis, and all of your opinions on from New Zealand's top boardrooms. It really is a must read. Thank you all so much for being here this morning, and get back to the boardroom. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.